Yo guys, what's going on? Robert Warshak here, and I'm gonna be going over what are the safest primes to craft and which are the ones that kind of stand out as the best. Granted, all of the primes are really good in their own sort of situation. You can always find, where a prime would shine, right? But overall, just over the course of the games that I've played, which ones are really pumping through and which ones are like, yep, that's if you're playing like, for example, the first prime we're gonna talk about, if you're playing a mage deck, the Mage Prime stands out to be like the kind of best prime. When you play it, it sometimes just wins you the game. Not only is the 2 mana 3/2 spell damage +1 good, but its final form, the Solarian, I've had it pyroblast me twice in the head, which is hurts. But most of the time, it's going to cast some secrets. It's going to do some AoE, draw some cards. It does some damage because it targets the enemies if possible within its abilities. So a lot of the times, like I said, this is just going to swing the board in your favor very drastically. So a lot of the control mages, all of the Highlander mages are playing this card. And obviously, if you're playing no minion mage, you wouldn't play this card. But this is proven to be like just one of the better of the primes, just due to how just board swingy it is. You play this card, it just does a lot of stuff. The next one's going to be the Hunter Prime. This very, very good. Again, the original form, the first form is the 3 mana 2/4. It has rush, and the key is it does something the second it comes out, and we're finding ourselves in a meta that's very, very fast paced. There's a lot of aggro decks. Demon hunters are on the loose, and we need to be able to chip down or kill some of their creatures, right? So the first form of it is good in itself, which is a key factor. Then the Zixor Prime, originally when I looked at it, it just looked underwhelming, right? 8 mana 4/4. I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of mana, not enough stats, but it summons 3 copies of this minion. And after playing our Death Rattle Beast Hunter deck, every single time I drew the prime and played it, I basically won. It was just it's basically a 16/16 rush based off in 4 bodies, and if it sticks, you just win. It's insane. Like it doesn't look that like overwhelming, but when you play with it and you play the card, you just do work. It's just good. So the Hunter Prime stands out to me as being like one of the top contenders, because again, when looking at these primes, this Hunter Prime can fit into any Hunter deck. It fits into a Beast Hunter deck. It fits into a Death Rattle Hunter deck. It fits into a mid-range Hunter deck. The only thing it doesn't fit into is a Face Hunter deck, which is basically a budget deck where you wouldn't want to play this guy anyway. But again, I'm looking at when recommending these primes, where do they fit in all of the Hunter decks or all of the Mage decks, or is it just like one particular one? Which again, when we get down the line, I'll kind of explain why I didn't choose one of the primes as being one of the better ones. Looking at our third one, it's going to be the Warrior Prime. Again, you can play this in Tempo Warrior, you can play this in Highlander Warrior, you can play this in Control Warrior. If it's in all the Warrior decks, because it's good. It's a 4 mana 4/4 rush in its first form, which is basically going to kill a minion, and then from there it turns into the 8 mana 10/10, which is going to kill a minion because it has a rush, and then when it does kill a minion, you get 10 armor, which is a huge health gain right there, or armor gain, I should say, right? Also, if it sticks on the board, you're able to kill another minion that's 20. So not only is it going to kill a minion when it comes out, your opponent's going to want to kill it, which is basically going 2 for 1, plus you get armor, which makes you that much harder to kill during the late game, which is exactly what Control Warrior wants to do, right? So heading to our next prime, again, a very, very good prime we have here. This is going to be the Priest Prime. It's a 1 mana 1/3 lifesteal. So again, not really as impactful as maybe the Mage or the Warrior one where it deals with stuff immediately, but it's a very solid 1-drop. The key is with this one, is like Mage Prime, the 7 mana 6/8 has Taunt, and it has Lifesteal, and only you can target it with hero powers or spells. So your opponent can't polymorph it, they can't hex it, they can't do Shadow Word Death it. They have to basically attack it with minions to get rid of it, or use some AoE like Twisting Nether that doesn't actually target it. This is really, really good because you're basically almost guaranteed to be able to heal for at least 6. If it sticks on the board, you're healing for at least 12. It's going to take at least 1, 2, possibly 3 of your opponent's cards to get through this. They're going to sack minions. They're going to sack, spells. And it's really good in the Res Priest package. For those of you Res Priest players, it fits in the Highlander list. It fits in the new sort of Steel Priest list that's floating around. It's good to resurrect. It wins in fatigue, and just generating a whole bunch of Reliquary Primes is just really, really good. So if you're a Priest player, the Prime is definitely a very, very safe bet for you because it's a fantastic card. Moving to the Paladin Prime, it's a 2 mana 2/1 Divine Shield, so not a bad early game minion to play. The only downside to this guy is Paladin really isn't a very popular deck right now. There's no great Paladin deck, so that's why this guy doesn't really bit higher on this list is just because Paladin in itself isn't powerful. But this guy himself is very powerful because his final form, the 8 mana 6/3, summons 4 random Murlocs, but they have Divine Shield. So if it just summoned the Murlocs, it'd be pretty bad, right? Your opponent can easily deal with, anywhere between 3 to 1 HP minions, regardless if there's 5, 4, 3 of them. It doesn't matter. It's very low HP. But they have Divine Shield, which makes it so they basically have to have 2 forms of AoE, or they have to have minions out. The minions then have to trade, and then they have to use AoE. If not, you're going to be able to hit your opponent in the face for quite a bit of damage, because this guy has 6 attack, and then, the Murlocs, between 4 of them, better at least have another 6 attack, if not more, because Murlocs like to buff each other, and you're going to be able to hit your opponent in the face for quite a bit of damage. So very, very solid card here. Again, when Paladin gets more powerful, this guy's going to be a real shiner because he is a good card. Heading on over to the Warlock Prime. This guy is actually found in basically just one deck, and that's going to be Zoo Warlock right now, because your demons cost 1 less. A lot of Zoo players are running him because you play him, then you just play a bunch of Flame Imps and Void Walkers and all just kind of basically free demons you throw up on the board. Your opponent can't deal with it, you win. They don't really care about the 8 mana 7/6/1, which summons 3 friendly demons that game, because the demons that you're playing in your deck are very low impact, 1 mana 3/2s. And while that's really good in the early game, it doesn't really do much in the later stages of the game. So that's why this guy ranks kind of low on my list, because he's only really found in Zoo Warlock. I did, however, make a quest handlock, or quest demon big handlock list, running demons and then prioritizing the prime, being a super late game value tool to resummon the new demon warlock card, the 8 mana 5/7 with taunt, and it summons another demon when it dies. But that deck, again, is a very fringe deck, and it's not very meta. So the Warlock Prime, unfortunately, is not a big shiner for me right now. Still a good Prime, still fits into Demon decks, still fits into Zoo, but again, really only just Zoo, and you're only taking advantage of half of the Prime. Moving to the Druid one, same thing follows for this guy. He's really only played in Quest Druid. Quest Druid doesn't even exist right now. I've played hundreds of games, and I've fought 0 Quest Druids. 0. I haven't, it just doesn't exist. So when you make this guy, you really don't want to play him in your Ramp Druid, because, if you side quest pulls him, you don't get the choose one effects. You want to definitely play the quest so you can benefit off picking both of the choose ones, which again isn't a powerful deck. So that's why, unfortunately, the Druid Prime right now falls a little bit short, because, Quest Druid did take a hit with this most recent transition, with losing the flop and some other key cards that were, belonged into that deck. Plus, with the meta being as fast as it is, Quest Druid is probably not the best answer right now. And again, if you're playing Ramp Druid or Big Druid, you don't want to side quest pull the 10 drop, because he's just a 10 mana 9/9 with no particular ability, no taunt, nothing. Looking at the Shaman Prime. Again, the Shaman, not a very prominent deck. Some people are playing Evolve Shaman, which you wouldn't really want to run Death Rattle cards anyway, because you're at risk of evolving it into something else. There's some Highlander Shamans, some Quest Highlander Shamans, but again, very fringe decks, not really breaking out of the scene as being very solid. But Lady Vash in herself, I mean, she's a 3 mana 4/3, stats are there, spell damage +1, very solid. The problem is with the Prime, it's a 7 mana 5/4, so stats really aren't there. And then you draw 3 spells, reduce their cost by 3. While this is, a very great draw mechanic, reducing spells is great, it doesn't necessarily impact the board immediately. If we've seen some of the better primes, when you play it, it swings the board state very heavily. It does a lot of damage, it summons minions, it does something that you can see immediately. With this card, it's giving you value, but you may not utilize that value until later stages of the game. Stat-wise, she's much lower stats than a lot of the other primes, and the spell damage, you can't take advantage of it. So there's a lot of requirements, for the Druid one. There's a lot of requirements for the Shaman one. So I think that's why these really aren't played as much, and haven't really been seen as much. Not to say, again, they're not good. They're very powerful, but just not anywhere near as powerful as, like, for example, the Mage one and the Hunter one that just sees immediate results. And then last but not least, we have the Rogue Prime. So stat-wise, the first of the primes, we have the 3 mana 3/4 stealth. That's good. It's actually, like, being able to guarantee the minion's probably going to stick because it has stealth makes this a little bit better, because you can play the Akuma and you can play it in your Highlander Rogue, you can play it in your Tempo Rogue. Generally, it's just a good card. But its final form is the 6 mana 6/5. It's a lot of mana. It doesn't impact the board immediately. It does stay permanently stealth, so if you get it off of, like, a Galakron, it feels very good. But that's not very consistent, right? That's going to happen once every 20 games, maybe even more, right? Just in comparison again to the other primes, it doesn't have the same sort of awe moment when you play it and you're like, damn, that feels good. So as it is a really cool card and it's not bad, it's just the power level is obviously not the same. But Akuma in himself is one of the better, like, first versions of the Prime, because again, it's statted very nicely and it has stealth. So you're guaranteed to, again, be able to kill like whatever the next turn or be able to attack face. That's pretty solid. But this is up for a lot of discussion. Again, these are just my picks. I'm sure if you guys have a lot of your favorites, you've probably played with a lot of the primes yourself, and I would love to open up the comment section to hear your favorite prime. Maybe if the list isn't to your liking, what prime do you think I maybe overvalued or undervalued? But these are my thoughts. This is what I've seen over hundreds of games. And D-Money and Draco on today's podcast, I wanted their opinion, but even before I made this video, to make sure I was on the right track. And they kind of like solidified what I was thinking, and they're very high legend players themselves, and they're basically seeing the same thing that I'm seeing at the rank I'm at. It was good to hear some reassurance, but again, that's a very small sample size in comparison to how many of you guys there are versus how many of us there are. So with that, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully this narrows down which primes, if you're thinking about crafting them, which ones to craft, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode, of course. With that, I'm Robert Warshak. Thank you guys for watching, and happy whatever the hell day it is.